Before we head into our last segment here, I just want to thank both Brian and Kelly again for being here. This is extremely helpful for everyone. So Brian, do you want to head us into the last section?
Sure, I'll be happy to, Emma. And it's been a pleasure being here. As everybody can see, I enjoy talking about home inspectors and the problems that they face. And I could probably talk for hours if you gave me the opportunity. Anyway, these are some sort of useful tips. They don't really fit into a single topic. So what we're going to do is we're going to just throw out some other things to think about. And they're important enough that I wrote them down, so they're probably important enough you want to listen to them. Number one is, in real estate, most states now require the seller of a single-family home to provide what's called a seller disclosure statement, where the seller tells the potential buyer everything that they know about their own home that's wrong. Because that's a routine real estate form that real estate brokers and agents handle all the time and they have to sign off on it, they've gotten pretty good at making sure that sellers of real estate really do disclose everything. Well, as a home inspector, I would love to get a copy of the seller disclosure statement before I go in and do my home inspection, because then that stain on the wall that we talked about might actually be revealed as an old leak that was repaired such and such a date, and they just never repainted the wall. Which, as a home inspector now, it's like, okay, good. I could call it out, but then I can reference the fact that it refers to an earlier repair and it was part of the seller's disclosure. And I can put that in my report and tie those two documents together. So now if there's a problem 6 months from now, the problem is who did the repair work, not whether I saw it or not as the home inspector. And so one of the things that I think is really important, and it's just a little trick of the trade, is get your hand on that seller disclosure statement. If the property's in contract or in escrow, that statement is probably one of the first things the seller has to sign, and you want to see it because it's a roadmap for you through the seller's eyes of what they know about the property, including things that have gone wrong that they have fixed or things that they've gone wrong and ignored. So it's a really good roadmap for a home inspector to use. The other thing is, sometimes people put in, in addition to your standards of practice, they'll put in statements of professional ethics. They aren't going to hurt you or help you in a legal sense, but in a customer relationship sense, a simple statement of professional ethics, I promise to be honest and, disclose things, blah, 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 is a feel-good statement. And sometimes a feel-good statement like that also means that if there's a problem down the road, your client calls you up with a question rather than an accusation. And there's a big difference mentally in how they're approaching you because of how you approach them as a professional, believing in ethical treatment and ethical communication with your client. So putting that in there is another little trick. It's a one-liner, sometimes maybe 2 sentences. Your insurance company may also want you to have waiver of subrogation language, which I won't go into legally speaking, but essentially it means if there are 2 insurance companies arguing about who's responsible, and the repair behind the wall is a good one. So 6 months ago, there was a leak. The seller's disclosure said 6 months ago, a plumber came out and fixed it. You report that, then there's a problem 6 months from now. They bring you and the plumber in, and the plumber has insurance and you have insurance. And the problem that you have now is which insurance company takes the lead. One of the things you don't want is to be in the middle of that. So waiver of subrogation language gives you the opportunity to let the insurance company sit down and decide who's primary, who's secondary, who has coverage, who doesn't, who's the responsible party, who's not the responsible party. But that's going to be something guided by the insurance company that you're doing business with, where you're getting your liability policy. One other trick that I've seen, homeowner finds a problem, 6 months after they move in. They call a contractor who may or may not be their brother-in-law to come out and take a look at it. And of course, they come out and they say, "Oh, gee, this is a serious problem. It's going to cost $10,000 to fix it." And you go, "Well, I don't have $10,000. I can't afford this. I put all my money into the down payment How am I going to pay for repairs? And then they go, well, did you have a home inspection done? And you say, well, yeah, I had a home inspection done. Well, home inspectors have insurance. You should file a claim against your home inspector. Now, this is coming from the contractor who wants to get paid to do the repair work, mind you. So one of the things that I've suggested to home inspectors, when the client tells you, my contractor said, ask the contractor to sign a SWOT statement that they know that what they're talking about existed on the date of your home inspection report, and that they understand that if they mislead anybody, they could be personally liable for costs and damages. Because it's one thing when they're standing there whispering in the client's ear that there's a $10,000 problem and the home inspector's insurance should pay for it. It's an entirely different response when the homeowner asks the contractor, oh, good, would you sign a statement to that effect and agree that you'll be liable if that's not true? I'd say about 80% of those contractors step back and go, I'm not signing anything. At which point in time, if I'm the buyer, client, I'm wondering whether the contractor is telling me the truth, and I start trusting my home inspector a little bit more. It's a little trick. If you get it signed, great. If you don't get it signed, that's fine too. It's the act of putting that in front of the contractor that changes the relationship between you, your client, and the contractor. Now it's you and your client maybe against the contractor instead of your client and the contractor against you. And that's just psychological warfare and legal 101, how to protect yourself from terrible lawyers out there like me. Then the last thing is, when you do recommend that a client have repairs done before they close on the house, make sure they understand those repairs need to be done before they take possession, before money and title change hands. Because a lot of times they'll read, oh, well, you should get this plumbing leak fixed. And they think that means, oh, it's not serious, I can wait till after I move in. And then they move in, and a month later the pipe breaks entirely and the flooding is $10,000 claim and it was a $500 repair. You want to make sure your report emphasizes that the things you recommend and get repaired all get repaired prior to the close of escrow, prior to the sale taking place. And emphasize the ones that are critical, that they have to be done. And if there's anything life-threatening, health, safety, make sure those are red flagged, bolded, underlined, sharp arrows. I mean, pretty much anything neon sign if you can fit it on your report, because what you want to make sure is that there's no chance that somebody will simply gloss over that and think that these are simply routine items that can wait until tomorrow. That's really critical, because if you say that and they decide to wait until tomorrow, the judge is looking at it going, well, right here he says you needed to do this like yesterday and you waited 2 months. Why didn't you do it when he told you to do it? Now the burden is on the homeowner, your client, to defend their sitting on their hands after you told them, hey, the building's on fire, you might want to call the fire department. Because that's really what a health and safety issue is, and that is do something right away or people could get hurt. And so it's important that be part of your approach and writing your report, is to make sure that they understand that this work has to be done before they take possession and own the house. And I think that's probably the kind of practical tips that would be helpful to most home inspectors. You may not want to use all of them. You may want to just pick one or two, but these little tricks can reduce your exposure to liability and can reduce the number of claims that your insurance company ends up having to defend in the rest of your professional career, I guess. Kelly, you got anything to add to that? I know you've seen a lot of
I would say
situations.
just that last point, to also make sure that you explain to them either in person, which hopefully they are in person at the inspection, but make sure that they know any issues that need to be looked at prior to closing. We see a lot of claims where it's specifically stated in the inspection report that such and such needs to be looked at timeframes given and the timeframes aren't followed, and the inspector did everything right, the client just did not listen. But it is important that verbal communication is there as well on those particular areas.
I think that's a good point. When you deliver your report, if there's anything that you want attention drawn to, if you hand it over, I would still put a cover letter that draws attention to it. And if you email an electronic version, I would certainly make sure your cover email says, pay special attention to item 3 in section 4. It is a critical matter that you get repaired. So re-emphasize that, whether you're doing it verbally or in writing. And if you do it verbally, follow it up with something in writing, so you've got something in your file confirming that I told you item 4 in section 3 is really important. Make sure you do something about it. So just make sure you document that. It's not enough that you just write it, but you really do have to sort of, got to lead the horse to water, but they have to stick their nose in it so they drink, I guess, is the best analogy. Sometimes people can be told the building's on fire and just sit there and say, yeah, but I've got a good TikTok video on. I don't want to leave. Well, when the building's on fire, it's time to leave. And with that, I think we've covered just about everything we hope to cover in this first session, and I look forward to doing some more in the future.
Thanks, Brian.
Same here. Thank you both again for walking through this. It has been extremely informative.